Hi, my name is Kevin, and I played a lot of games in January, so let's talk about them. Over here, I have my board game geek out, and this is my logged plays of the month by game. The way I figured that I would talk about this is starting from the games that I've only played once. We're going to go reverse alphabetical because the list is sorted in like a proper alphabetical form. I'm going to go from the bottom up, and then eventually we're going to get to the game that I played the most. I would guess there's about 50 or so games, 50 or so individual games that I've played, around 70 or 80 plays, so it's a pretty good month. I am a pianist by day, so there are definitely days where I need to be practicing all day. There are days where I need to pivot my day around a performance that I have, and it takes a lot of adrenaline and stuff out of me. So that's basically right now the goal this year or this month was to balance my music side and my board gaming side, and I thought I did it pretty well. I played a lot of very light games because that's what most of my collection is about, but we did get a couple of heavier, maybe midweight to some of you, those games out as well, and that is very, very exciting. So without further ado, let's get started with Wingspan. I've played one game of Wingspan. It was with my girlfriend, and she crushed me. This was the first time that she beat me, and it was like a landslide victory. There was like a whole egg thing she was going for, and my cards just didn't line up. But that is okay. So one of the reasons that I wanted to start talking about the games I've played again is because I have a lot of hot takes, hot and spicy takes when it comes to when it just comes to games, my opinions on games, etc. And my hot spicy take for Wingspan is that at this point, I would only play it as a two-player game with every expansion added. So that means we do have the Oceania with the Nectar, and we do have the two-player duet mode board. The main reason for the two-player duet mode board is that when I see the whole, Go type game that we're playing, we're trying to put tokens on in like an area control type of way. Going back to like a 3-player, 4-player type of a linear round end majority thing just seems kind of, it's a little more dull. I like the 2-player thing a lot. I think surprisingly a lot of the Wingspan cards seemed very balanced for 2 players. Something like a pink power, maybe a little bit nerfed because you don't have as many turns until your next one. But when you assess a hand of bird cards now, you're going to look at the pink power and say, is my one opponent going to lay that many eggs before I activate it? Like, I think the deck is still balanced. It plays differently than from a multiplayer game. But for a game that's mostly solitaire, adding that area control board is great. And I do like the Nectar. I think the wild food works better than having to most of the time spend 2 foods as any one food. I don't really like that. It's not as thematic. Even though in the Nectar mode, you still do that sometimes. I just think there are a lot more cool birds. I like the Nectar majority thing. That's also pretty cool, even with 2 players. And yeah, that's what I think. All expansions, all together, only 2 players. And I had a blast, even though I lost really badly. But next time I'll get her. I was hoping, this was earlier during the month, and I was hoping to have the chance to, redeem myself in another play of this game. But we got carried away with other stuff. So that's Wingspan. And then the next game that I have is listed under a Wildlife Safari, which is also known as Botswana. But I actually was able to find a very, very cheap copy. It was a miracle of the oldest version of this Reiner Knizia game, who is my favorite designer, by the way. This is Quandary. So even though we're on W, we're going to skip to Q for a second and come back. This is Quandary. The box is like humongous. It's got one of those like classic 90s games. Like they didn't know how to package things. Things were way too big. And it's got really, really chunky acrylic tiles. I thought the production value when I finally saw it, because I heard about how good the production for Quandary is and how you'll never go back. And I'm like, I'm never a production value guy, so I didn't believe it. I didn't believe the hype. But then when I saw those chunky tiles, oh my goodness, I could not go back to the little plastic figurine animals. And I like the plastic figurine animals in the first place, but those chunky tiles are pretty amazing. So yeah, we played a game of Quandary, and there's something about that game that I want to dive into. I'm thinking about a lot, which is in the Botswana versions and the later versions, such as like Thor and whatever, and Loco even, the really chintzy card version of the game. In the game, you are trying to basically grab stocks and play cards to manipulate the value of the stocks. In all future versions of the game, other than Quandary, each stock there are only 5 copies of. But in Quandary, there are actually 6 of each stock. And I'm wondering why Knizia, or all the publishers maybe, decided to remove 1 stock of each type. Right now, I have a little house rule where with Quandary, if I play with 4 players, I use all 6 stocks. But if I play with 3 players, which is surprisingly my favorite count to play this game because there's a lot of control, I remove 1 and use the Botswana rules where there are only 5 of each stock. And there hasn't been any conversation about that on Board Game Geek. Maybe I'll start one, but I'm trying to figure out the wording to really bring that up. Maybe do some calculations of my own to see if there's any type of math that checks out or whatnot. So yeah, that's my play of Quandary. It was great. It was with 3 players, and I don't think I won that one either. So far the track record isn't really good. But now we get to some new games that just got added to my collection. So I am located in upstate New York, Rochester, and we have the biggest board game store in the country, which is Millennium Games. Shout out to Millennium Games. But I decided to do something crazy because this is Nerdy Game Talks, the channel anyway. I have to do something nerdy to redeem my name. I decided they have a big used game section, a big used game shelf. And then within that, they have games that have, they accept it as a used game, but they haven't been sold for long enough, so they decided to discount it even more. There's like multiple layers of used games in that store, which is basically my like lifeline for like being able to stay afloat in this hobby, because I wouldn't say I'm just look at the setup. I'm clearly living in like a small apartment sort of situation. So and the board game hobby is getting more expensive. Like there are games that I want that just are like Everdell Farshore. It's $100. Like why is that game $100? I don't know, but that used shelf has been truly helping me just be able to explore a lot of interesting things in this hobby. A lot of interesting games that, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Oftentimes I find treasure in the stuff that people sold for very cheap. So the nerdy thing that I did is that I decided to first take a picture of every single $5 or $10 games. And believe me, there were quite a few. I think there were like 70 or 90 of those games. And then I went home, I did research on Board Game Geek and on YouTube of every single one of them. And then I ended up buying like probably 20 or so of them. And it was really gratifying. It was just really cool to be able to know what games that might be valuable to me that are currently charged for very cheap. One of them will come out later. Spoilers. It's going to be Orbis. There were so many cheap copies of Orbis, and I played it, and I'll talk to you about my thoughts a little bit later. But the game that I'm going to talk about right now is Wicked Witch's Way. This seemed like it got a lot of plays back when it came out, which is around 2006-ish. This is a speed game, and I love my speed games, especially speed games that are clever. And this one is really clever. You've got dice that show orange sides and dice that show black sides. And if the same symbol shows up on both sides, they're immediately canceled out. You don't take account for them. But you have to, after somebody rolls, take a look at what dice actually exist in a color without being canceled out. And then anytime somebody can cover the dice up, and then no one else can see them anymore, and then everyone has to guess. So it's a very simple system, but then it's actually a co-design by Bruno Cathala, which is, I did not know about that. Even when I did the research, nobody mentioned it was Bruno Cathala, because nobody knew who Bruno Cathala was back then. So that's really, really neat. And it's got a couple of his like signature things where there's going to be cards that give you special powers, a couple of things that make the game a little more juicy, a little more spicy. And I tend not to be a big fan of the way Cathala designs those extra things. Like, let's say Splendor Duel and Seven Wonders Duel, I thought some of the things were a little over-designed. You know, like you can have a little token if I do something that's powerful. Like those little things that feel very incremental, but at the end of the day make the game feel a little looser. Maybe a little more French, if you will. Maybe I'm not a big fan of the French school of design when it's at its most potent. But I thought in Wicked Witch's Way, around the central speed game, the little card stuff is really neat. I really liked it, and we had a friend who was really into speed games and usually quite good at them. He just could not look at those dice and get the right symbols on time. And I thought that was really funny that we found a game that he was actually not the best at. So that was a good rollicking time. And then after that, or before that, I guess, I had one play of Welcome to the Moon, and this was to try out the solo mode. So one of the things that I started this month is play a lot more solo games. A lot more for me. I know a lot of people, they mostly play solo games, so that's also really interesting. I probably have rookie numbers compared to you guys. But Welcome to the Moon, I tried the solo mode, and because apparently people really dig the solo mode, and I just did not really like it. You grab 3 cards, 2 of the cards, you have to look at the front and back and see if you want to use the symbol side or the number side, and then the last card you send to like an AI and they score a certain way. I like AIs in games, and I thought the AI part of Welcome to the Moon was really simple. There was a little bit of tension, even though I played the easiest mode. I could see there could be a lot of tension in the harder modes when it comes to, oh, am I going to beat the AI? Is it going to beat me? That's all really interesting. But that whole part where you have to choose which side, it's just a little too free, a little too smooth. It definitely sort of negates a lot of the tension that I found from the other part of the game. And so I really very much prefer the multiplayer mode where like I know which card is used for the symbol side, I know which card is used for the number side, and I have a few options, a few pairings to choose from there. I don't like the feeling of being able to make my own pairing. Something about that felt a little forgettable, if you will. But I think I will play a few more of those because there are 8 different boards in Welcome to the Moon. And the first time I had to teach this to a multiplayer game, it was a little hard having to look at the rule book, and there were some weird misprints of the rules. So I think if I know I'm going to be learning board 7, I might play a solo game just to get into that. And maybe eventually I'll finish a whole campaign in solo mode, just learning through all the games. Who knows? So maybe I'll come back to this, but solo mode, not so much for me. Okay, the next game I played, this was a game that I really need to get a copy of now because I played a friend's copy, and this was Trekking Through History. My goodness, this game blew my mind. I had heard how great this game was, but I didn't really look it up. And usually I have to look up a game, like really, really sink into its mechanisms before I decide to add it to my wish list. On this day, I was feeling like, oh, I want to just learn something new that I didn't know anything about. Just be a little less uptight, with my normal like rigid rules of I don't want to waste time on games that I know are going to be bad. This month, no, we played a lot of games that I thought I wasn't going to like, and then Trekking Through History was one that I could not believe how great it was. We played a 3-player game, and it's got that a little bit of. It reminds me of a little bit of Spice Road, and in fact, once I get my copy of this game, I don't think I'll ever play Spice Road at 3 players anymore. This game just completely kicked that. In 4 players, the market's a little more chaotic. I might still play it, but Trekking through history, you've got this chronology thing that's so smooth. You know, like you have to take the cards some way, and these cards give you good stuff. Like, you don't really have to pay anything to get the cards. So each turn is good. And I don't tend to like that. I like a little bit of like the tense sort of like, I need to pay something. How much do I dare to pay? But in this game, everything you take gives you something good. It gives you some bonus tokens that are good. And you're trying to create this little graph on your player sheet to hit certain points. Now that sounds like it could be a bit too abundant, but it's not. You really have to decide which path you want to go. Do you want to lay the chronology of the cards and focus on that? Or do you want to give up on the chronology a little bit to focus on your little graph player board? And I thought the choices were meaningful. The theme really came across, and the design, the look of the game was just spectacular. And I love the little patchwork style turn order track. Even that was interesting. And so it's a game that synthesized a lot of things, but each thing doesn't feel too watered down. And we're gonna get to another game, a much more heavy game that does feel watered down later. But for now, Trekking Through History was just absolutely amazing. I wanted to play it again, but I actually played this with my piano students, and when I came in for the next lesson, they didn't want to play that game anymore for some reason. They didn't see the brilliance that is Trekking Through History. They wanted to play more silly games. So, yeah, that's Trekking Through History. The next time I played one time is a little game called Tranquility. This was a Shelf of Shame game for a long time, and I played a 2-player game, me and my girlfriend, of Tranquility. We just played the novice mode, and we did win. But I really, really liked it. It's great to know that there is a game that feels like the mind or the game or Hanabi maybe, and it plays very well with 2 players. It doesn't feel like I'm missing, another player. I feel like Tranquility is very much a back and forth type of game. We're trying to make a grid of cards, lay down a bunch of numbers, but anytime you lay a number adjacent to another one, you need to discard as many cards as the difference between them. And so immediately there's a lot of tension, and it seems like there's a lot of what do you call it? There's a lot of difficulty scaling, right? You can add a bunch of obstacle cards and make the game a lot more chaotic. And I think through the most novice mode of this game, I'm ready for some chaos. I'm ready to explore this game a little more. It was fantastic. I loved it. And the next game, shout out to Z Garcia from the Dice Tower, I guess, because this is a game that he champions once in a while. It's an abstract game. It is from the German company that makes these games that just look like little cookie boxes. They're plain cardboard. You don't really know what it is. You have to read the side sticker. This is Tintas. Tintas is a game that it's very simple. You have 7 different tokens, 7 different color tokens, and there's 7 of each. So the board, you put 49 tokens in any random order. And then you have this one pawn that we're both manipulating, me and one other player. And we're just going to be taking all of one color if you can bounce back and forth, and there's enough empty spaces to bounce back and forth. So if there's 3 and there's all empty spaces, no other pieces blocking it, 3 white pieces, you can just take the pawn and then bounce around the grid and get all 3. But that might open up a spot for your opponent to do some other crazier stuff later. So it's such a simple game, and it has the end game scoring rules are basically exactly like that new game called Lacuna that has been pretty popular. I'm actually looking to get a copy of Lacuna myself because I think there's room in my collection for both games. But Tintas, with its ricocheting, bouncing back and forth, it's so elegant. It's so much better than like a lot of the classic abstract games, even though I feel like it could totally be one that I could introduce to anyone. It's not very tense, it's very easygoing, but around the end, you do start thinking about how to block your opponent from doing things. And so it's got that abstract grid movement, I guess. It's not really a grid, it's just spatial movement type of goodness. Loved it. Tintas. Wish I could have played it more, but then I look at all the other games I played and I feel a lot better. So the next game I played, oh, this was one that I immediately got rid of when I played it. This is a game called 10. 10 in all caps. This is by the trio that brought us Point Salad. And I think they mostly work with AEG, but I think they got a couple of other games out as well. If you hear a background noise, that's my rabbit chewing on hay. She's really cute. Yeah, I think 10 was released with AEG as well. And I thought I would like it. I thought it would be a more complex version of the game No Thanks, which it definitely appears to be that way. But there's like auctions that, it's like a push your luck game. And then sometimes you get a card that's a wild, and then your push your luck round gets interrupted by an auction. And I thought that was the clunkiest thing about the game. There were too many cards that required the auction to happen, and so the smooth little push your luck thing became just really confusing, because there's also like, after you push your luck, do I choose one type of card versus another? Okay, after I choose that one type of card, I can now buy a card from the market, and so I have this currency thing, and it's really, really it sounded tense when I read up the rules, but it just ended up being really loose. You know, you're just making rows. You're making rows in different colors, sort of like in No Thanks, except No Thanks there's only one row, there's only one type of color in general. But yeah, in this game you want to make multiple rows of colors, consecutive numbers, and the game ended up feeling like there were too many ways to get what you want. And so I just sold 10. We played a 4-player game. Seemed like it was the best count. The auction, every individual aspect was interesting. In fact, every individual aspect was a thing that I liked in general. It was a mechanism that I liked. But I ended up not really liking the game. So, bye 10. The next game I played is a game that, generally has a way worse reputation than 10, but it's one of my favorite 2-player fillers. If I want a brain-dead 2-player filler that is endlessly replayable and endlessly charming, look no further than Tacocat spelled backwards by the Exploding Kittens Company. I am telling you, people need to get into this game. This is nothing like the Tacocat Goat Cheese Pizza game. In fact, it has nothing to do with words or speed or anything. It's a simple 2-player game where the cards are distributed in this weird bell curve pattern. It's actually really, really neat. But you're playing, it's similar to a trick-taking, shedding type game, but each round is only about 30 seconds long. But within each 30 seconds, there's like a really magical arc that forms. And it's so easy to teach. Initially, it might be a bit confusing. So you have to keep one card in your hand at the end of each hand, where it's like the lowest card, the lower than your opponent. But then initially you have to simultaneously reveal a card that you want to be higher than your opponent, and then you can play like one trick maybe, like that's like a couple of let's say you play 3 12s, and then your opponent sees if they can beat that. If they can, you might play. They might play one more card, and then you're down to your last card. So each turn, there's only like 2 or 3 back and forths, and you're down to your last card. But for some reason, there's like the perfect synthesis of luck and tactics, and you get to sift through a couple of cards at the beginning, and there's like a rule about how many you can sift. And I'm not going to explain everything because I feel like I'm already explaining this game really badly, but when you look at this game, just look at the Dan King's review of this game, because he likes that one as well. It's such a neat piece of design. I could not believe it. And this is not my first time I've playing this game. I'm saying it like it's my first time playing this game, but it's my first time talking about this game. And I've had many, 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 many plays. And this one play that I had this month was no less charming, no less memorable, and this is an evergreen game in my collection. Tacocat spelled backwards. Please look it up. You can get it at your local Target. It'll be $15, and you will play it endlessly. It's so great. And then we move on to, wow, these are some really childish-looking games that we're getting into. The next game I played is a Jabba game called Strong Stuff. This is a dexterity game. And we played a 4-player game of this, And yeah, there's a bear. He's carrying a bunch of cylinders, wooden cylinders, and every time you land on a spot, you need to put that colored cylinder on top, and then you need to carry, well, the next person has to carry the bear to a new spot before a new cylinder is put. So you just, there's the spots, the locations are around a circle, and you're just trying to carry the bear to the next spot. And it's that simple, but it's so fun. And especially at a higher player count, like at 4 players, you get to a point where there's that feeling of, I hope it doesn't come back to me. And I loved how naturally that feeling came about, where like, you know, the person to the left of me is taking their turn and they get to put like the biggest cylinder up, and I'm just already thinking, I hope it doesn't come back to me. That sort of like, I want to shed all responsibility of this impossible thing that's going on in the table. I love that feeling, and Strong Stuff is able to do that with a Jenga dexterity type of feeling. So absolutely wonderful. The next game I played is yet another dirt simple game. This is Star Wars Jabba's Palace, a love letter game. I do not remember when I played Jabba's Palace. It must have been with my roommates. I think I played it once. Yeah, probably. So I played Star Wars Jabba's Palace. It was at 5 players. My favorite count. You will notice that I am extremely picky with my player counts, and that's one of the nerdy things about me. I'm really, really picky. If a game isn't played at its best player count, I'd rather not play the game. I'd rather be the one person who sits out and just watches everyone play the game than to be the extra player that would ruin an otherwise perfect player count. So Jabba's Palace, we played with 5 people, and again, I can't remember the play of it, but this is the love letter game that I think has the most legs for me. The synergies are really neat. I like it a lot. And there's still a little bit of consequence in like the little few wrinkles that they add, like R2D2. You can either look at the set aside card or the top or another player's card. Like, why would I ever want to look at the set aside card? But there have been situations where I did want to look at the set aside card. And this is why I think I like it more than the Avengers version. There's a version where it's an all versus one game where the heroes are trying to cooperate and fight Thanos. I found that with the cooperative side of the game, a lot of the things are interesting and they're kind of busy work, but they don't end up actually helping the other players as much as I would have thought. It still felt like a love letter random type game. So the all versus one cooperative nature didn't really come out. That's why the Infinity Gauntlet game I didn't really end up keeping. But the Jabba's Palace one is fantastic. And I actually own all of the Lost Legacy games. I snatched them early on in my collecting career when they were still kind of cheap to get. I guess it depends on where you get them, right? I think the Lost Legacy games, they either go for extremely overpriced or they go for surprisingly cheap. So in that one, I think it's basically more complex versions of Love Letter, but the thing is, if you have multiple sets, you can combine the numbers together. Like you can do 1 from this set and 2 from the other set, and then make like a custom game. I don't think any of the games that come with I'm really happy about, so I really need to start making my own sets, and I think Lost Legacy could be very fun. But for now, I will stick with Star Wars Jabba's Palace, and it is fantastic. The next game I played was Spots. Speaking of push your luck, speaking of a light game, but this one has a little bit of depth to it, has a little bit of complexity that I think actually worked towards the game's favor. The thing with Spots is there's a little bit of the Century Spice Road thing where you have to rest your cards, rest your tiles back, except everyone's using the same tiles. So like if I use the tile, that's like no one can use it anymore. And then when all the tiles but one are used, they all rest back. And that's really neat, but you're essentially trying to roll your dice and put your dice onto dogs. If a dog is missing a 2-spot space, then you need to roll a 2-spot die and put it on it. And as far as a dice manipulation push your luck game goes, I think Spots really hits the lovely just sort of the wiggle room that you can have, the design space that someone that one can comfortably have with a dice push your luck game. And I think there's a lot of room to discover. I actually looked at the recommended first game set and I'm like, I don't like it really much. So I designed my own. I'm gonna put it right here, and it's gonna say which starting tiles to use to make what, in my opinion, is the best first game setup for spots. No shame to the designers or the publishers. You made an awesome game. I just want to share my set that I think is the best for introducing the people to this game with. The next game I played is another 2-player evergreen for me. It is Spirits of the Wild. And this must have been really early in the month because I don't remember ever playing Spirits in the Wild this month. But this is once a Target exclusive, a little bit complicated to get now, a little bit expensive. But if you ever see a used copy for cheap, please get it. It has that Century Spice Road type of rest mechanic, but you're doing it with your own cards, and you're essentially taking tiles from a bowl and placing them onto your little scoring set collection board. In terms of the game in the middle where you take pebbles, it really reminds me of Azul, where there's like modern scoring when it comes to your own boards, but the thing you're doing in the middle feels kind of ageless, kind of timeless. It feels like, oh, this game should have existed forever ago. You just have these multicolored pebbles in this tiny dish, and you're trying to one up the other in like what colors show up from the bag. You're grabbing new ones from the bag, and then you're trying to just get the pairings that you want, or if you're going for different colors, get the different colors that you want, and hopefully your opponent doesn't get the ones that they want. It's so great. It's a back and forth. It has the successful feeling of an abstract game while having the sort of set collection of like a more modern family game, and it's wonderful. The end game is extremely chaotic, I will say, but once you're used to it, it is a really wonderful quirk that is in Spirits of the Wild. The next game that I played is another one of the $5 or $10 games that I got. This one was actually on my wish list already, so I'm very happy that I got it, and I'm very happy that my one play of it turned out to be really exciting. This is a Michael Schacht game called Shanghaien. If you haven't noticed, I do tend to get a lot of 2-player games played, and my collection has a lot of 2-player games. So that's kind of if you want family level 2-player games, this is definitely a good spot to be. Shanghaien is a dice rolling game. You roll dice, and then you're trying to do a tug of war with the dice results. And it sounds very swingy, but the Michael Schachtian mechanisms that were used to make this game feel interesting and fun, I thought were all really, really neat. I actually looked up some of the Michael Schacht Goody tiles, and I immediately looked at Goody Tile 3, and I decided to make my own. I actually just used a sticky note sheet, because that tile never goes into someo's hand. It just gets passed around. So I made my own little sticky note sheet, which is Goody Tile 3, and my student and I ended up playing that, and the Goody Tile 3 actually spiced up the game a lot. I don't think I'll be using any of the other Goody tiles, but Shanghaien was a really, really fun one. The next game I played, where am I? Okay, I played one game of Riff Raff. This is the amazing, amazing German dexterity game where you have to simultaneously select a card, and then the card that you choose corresponds to various planks on this boat that moves in a very natural way. It swings around, it circles around. It's a marvel of combining physics and board game design. But then you have to place variously weighted objects onto the various planks and just watch the ship tilt. And it's interesting how the hand management simultaneous selection game combines with the boat game, but at this point I have no problem teaching it, and it usually delivers really well. People don't get confused with the hand management part, which I heard, some people say that might be a little over-designed. I would disagree with that. People either immediately gravitate towards it, or they immediately know, oh my goodness, this is not my type of game, because of the dexterity portion. And so the game works as a package for me and the people I introduce it with. So that's Riff Raff. Excellent. The next game I played was Reef. Reef is an Emerson Matsuuchi design, and this is another one where I did look up this mini expansion called the King of the Corals, that's what it's called. And it's impossible to get right now, so I just took some blue, very nice blue dice, and I pretended that they were the little fishies that were So this game basically became Biblios because you never roll the dice, and the values on the dice, well, don't even matter, which makes it even less important than Biblios, the fact that they're dice. But yeah, so the fishies, they kind of move back and forth, and depending on where they are, if you can score that reef while the fish is on it, you get to earn extra points. And so it makes the game even more solitaire, which is not a problem for me because the game is already very solitaire, but it does make your little solitaire puzzle a little bit more interesting. It adds even a little more interest in what you're doing with your little coral reef grid. The one thing that I have about this game is I think when we get to the final scoring, it's hard to really know why the other players did better than you. Like if you're losing, if you're winning, it's even hard to say like why I won. That victory point part does feel a little less meaningful than a lot of games, but other than that, the main game is designed so well that I still think it is a fantastic game. That is Reef. I need to check what time it is. Okay. Well, I might need to speed up on some of these. Or I need to come back after heading out, but you'll never know. Okay, the next game is Qwinto. Qwinto is an evergreen light roll and write for me. I think it's better than Quicks. And I find teaching this game to be a little tricky because the scoring is a little hard to wrap your head around, especially if I'm showing it to somebody who doesn't play games at all. But my one player Qwinto, it was fun. I liked it. I like it more at lower player counts. I think 2-player Qwinto is really, really interesting. But then with more players, because everyone's choosing the same dice, somehow, even though our boards end up being totally different, it feels like I'm not making as many active dice roll choices. So I don't know. I like it with the smaller player count. Next game I played was Qawale. This is the magical game from Gigamic with the wooden pebbles. What an interesting concept, right? With the giant wooden pebbles. And it's basically Connect 4 Mancala. And I love this game. I don't remember, it must have been earlier in the month. I don't remember playing this, but you move around, and at this point, I've played it enough where I realized the only way to play it well is to cover up your opponent's pieces, because you need to look from above to see if there's like a row or a column. So I just spend my time covering my opponent's pieces up as soon as possible, so they have no chance of making a Connect 4. But eventually they become so stacked that the game becomes observing and recognizing a way to win once all the stacks are super full. And I think that actually means the game is more replayable. I don't think that breaks the game. I actually think knowing the arc of the game makes that final bit where you have to recognize like find the win, like a chess puzzle. Really, really interesting. So that's Qawale. And then I played my Kickstarter master box set of Project L. And this is with all the expansions added, the finesse, the ghost pieces. And I liked Project L. I thought it was good. I didn't think there was a need to own it. But now with the finesse expansion, I think the game is just absolutely wonderful. It's a perfect Gateway Plus style game. Finesse expansion, you get to earn coins by being able to accomplish certain tasks every round. And from the beginning of the game, you know which tasks you need to accomplish. Like this turn, I might need a lot of 4 size Tetris pieces. And so I will, try to plan my turns around to get that to happen. But each turn, there's a separate goal. And so which ones do I want to prioritize? Which ones do I not? And with the coins, you can spend 2 of them to take extra actions during your turn. So they're not something that you can just ignore. And the end game becomes more concrete, and it becomes way more than just a contract fulfillment, puzzle, just grinding points by fulfilling little contracts. I tend to not like those as much. So with the finesse expansion, Project L becomes an absolute masterpiece of a game. I tried Texas Hold'em. This is poker. Next entry is poker. So I tried Texas Hold'em for the first time. And I guess I'll do it again. I don't know. There were kids playing and adults, but we were all very inexperienced. So I'm sure the metagame, which is what all poker is about, I know, but the yeah, I'm sure the metagame is interesting, but the main game about like, the sets, figuring out your hand and then revealing them, I just thought it was kind of lame. I really did. I did not understand it. I think, I'm sure this won't be the last time I play poker, and I hope someday to really be like really to recognize the greatness that is poker or Texas Hold'em. But right now, not for me at all. The next time I played was a single game of Planted, a game of nature and nurture. This was because recently I gotten into designing my own Sushi Go sets, and I like my Sushi Go sets more than the ones that are recommended in the book. This is just a thing with me. So I needed to see if the other Phil Walker Harding drafting game that I have needed to be called. And turns out it doesn't, because Planted is still very, very fun. I really like the decision of whether to play a tool card to buff my engine, or, the decoration card to improve my scoring, or do I need to actually be collecting resources to water my plants? This is really neat. I really dig that. And the points ended up being very interesting. I ended up going for big decoration, and I thought this was going to win me the game, right? Because I've seen games where the decorations really just make a player win. But it turns out that another player who combined the decorating and the watering of the plants really well, they ended up taking the lead. So that just means the game is very well designed and super neat, and so I am keeping Planted. The next game I played was a game that I think you can only get in Korea these days. This is Pile Up Rush. This is a 2-player game where you basically play speed stacking with an hourglass mechanism too, a very short hourglass mechanism, onto a tiny little funky wooden platform. And it's very chaotic, very fast, and you play a couple of rounds until somebody reaches 4 points. And I think it is a great little stress-inducing but still chill type of dexterity game for 2 players. The next game I played was Perudo. This is Liar's Dice. We had a bunch of dice around, so I decided to give Liar's Dice another go. And it's fine. Coyote's better, in my opinion. I like Coyote more. Coyote's a bit more robust. I think whether it's the early game or the end game, because a lot of people like Liar's Dice because the way it gets people get eliminated, and then the last few turns are always so interesting. I think Coyote is just better. So if we ever have a lot of dice around, I might still teach people Liar's Dice because it's so easy to teach, right? But I actually was presented the opportunity at Millennium Games with their little discount shelf, their used shelf, a copy of Perudo, which is the popular version of Liar's Dice. And so I could have gotten a copy of it for $5, but then I thought, do I really want to have Perudo in my collection as like an option for people to take? And the answer was no. I would prefer the modern version of Coyote every day. So that's Perudo or Liar's Dice. The next game I played was Penguin Party. I played a 3-player game of Penguin Party. Knizia, probably the simplest Knizia game I own, where you're just playing little penguin cards and you're trying to make an 8 plus 7 plus 6 plus 5, etc. pyramid. But it's the simple game where like each floor up, you need to have at least one color underneath it in order for it to go up. So we're looking at our hand and deciding when do I want to play this card into the foundation. I think this game scales very well. You can play 3 up to probably 5, and the feel is very different each time. Just know that with each additional player, you have to play that many rounds, at least if you follow the rules. So if you're playing a 5-player game, you're going to be playing a couple of rounds, but I think there's a couple of interesting mechanisms, and the game itself, while sounding ridiculously simple, actually does offer some nice little, very featherweight tactics. So Penguin Party is one that I adore, and I have the Korean version where the penguins are like celebrating holidays and they're like hanging Christmas trees, and it's just the most adorable thing. Like my heart melts every single time I see the art. So that's another reason to keep Penguin Party. Okay, we've gotten to the point where we need to talk about Orbis. And Orbis is very, very interesting, right? It clearly is modeled off of Splendor. It's got the same box size as Splendor. The layout looks like Splendor. There are a couple of rules that resemble Splendor, but unlike Splendor, the game is a really, really brutal, and really, really quirky and neat game about just tile laying. And it's funny that it's right after Penguin Party, because you're also building your 5 by 4 by 3 pyramid, and it's the same rule regarding the color. So it's really neat that those two games were alphabetically together. But Orbis was a really tough teach. There were a couple of rules that I just did not get right. But fortunately, on the rule book, they actually tell you rules you are going to forget. And I had remembered all of them except one. So probably I should have actually consulted that part and remembered that the rulebook is actually competent and actually has a section for first-time players. So that was on me. But the game was surprisingly crunchy, and it felt like it went against a lot of what modern family games are about, which is, a little more easygoing, like games like Canvas, where Canvas is just the one that popped into my head, where you can just do a bunch of stuff, and then you just get to see a piece of art at the end. Orbis, you do get to see a pyramid at the end, but the journey through that is one that actually, stresses me out a little bit when I think about it. So in most games, a la Splendor, a la any game, there's like a way where you can get your resources, just by getting them from like a supply pool. In Orbis, you don't do that. In Orbis, it just depends on which tiles you take, and then cubes get generated onto the adjacent ones. And so that part in Spice Road where you have to put like you can take cubes based on what other people are willing to pay for the cards further along the market. That mechanism, that's the only mechanism in Orbis. That's the only way you can get more cubes. And that blew my mind. I thought it was ridiculously quirky, but even more ridiculous in that it actually works. And it creates an extremely compelling puzzle that they did it. They were able to pull it off. And I'm really ready to play it again. I can see why there are so many cheap copies of it at Millennium, because it's not a game for everybody. It's what you see is what you get, and the puzzle is very replayable, but every time you play it, you need to be ready to be in the headspace of this game. It reminds me of Calico, but a bit more obtuse. Like Calico, it's hard to play, but the game is so straightforward. You need to match the patterns, you need to match the colors. Orbis, there's that extra layer of like the obtuseness of the rules where you're like, or opaque. What is the word? It's not obtuse, it's opaque, right? The rules are a bit more opaque. The rules are a bit more head scratching, So you have this extra rule layer on top of the really quiet puzzle that you're making. And I felt like that was the last game we played that night, and I was beat. I was just, wow, that's it. We're going home now after Orbis. So that's really neat. The next game I played was No Swap, No Pay. This is another Korean game. I think it's by Mandu, which is a Korean-based company. And this is a ridiculously fun game where you have to swap bags with each other, basically. Do snake drafts, swap bags with each other, try to cut each other off, because there's one type of token where if you don't have enough of them, your entire bag of coins is worth 0. You can always look at the bag that's presented in front of you, but you're going to be swapping a lot of bags. And so you're going to not know what you're going to have. So it's just a lot of fun. And I think we played a 3-player game of it where there's like a ghost bag and anyone can swap with the ghost bag. And that is actually, it's really neat that with like the one fewer player, they were able to come up with such an excellent variant that makes the 3-player game a very different experience, but one that is equally good, in my opinion. And I think that's the version that I played. So that's No Swap, No Pay. Please check it out and get your cheapest copy if you're into like rather chaotic but extremely clever fillers. The next game I played was one game, really. I played one game of my Shelfie, even though I thought that I played more, because the one game of my Shelfie was pretty recent. And I just love my Shelfie. Hold on. No, wait. I totally played 2 games of my Shelfie. Why didn't I log it? Oh no. Oh yeah, because I think I met up with somebody at a coffee shop and the only game I played was my Shelfie and I forgot to log it. Dang it. Oh, inaccurate. Whatever. I played 2 games of my Shelfie. That's why. And when I just got the game, I had intended it to just be a 2-player game. And you know, me with the player count, I get really dogmatic about my player counts. But then recently, I'm like, maybe this game is actually pretty good with 3. And so I tried a 3-player game, and of course it was good. You know, the mahjong style central thing, it still is interesting. You know, certain colors are more desired by players, and so one player will end up with a bunch of tiles that they don't end up liking. Whereas in the 2-player game, the mahjong table is a little bit shorter or a little bit smaller, and so there aren't as many tough decisions right before the refill. So it's great that I was able to come around to that. But in my opinion, my Shelfie is the Sagrada killer for me. It has the elegance of the Sagrada without the swinginess of the dice pips, which was my big problem. But the rules teach is so simple. But with a few simple rules, Phil Walker Harding and Matthew Dunstan were able to create a game that is quite tense, but still very chill. So that's my Shelfie. Absolutely love it. The next game I played is, oh boy, I can't believe I even own this game, but I do really like it. This is MLEM by Reiner Knizia. This is kind of like a kid's game where you roll dice and then you have to lock dice in. Almost like it's like Knizia's own Yahtzee variant, right? Like Yahtzee, you can reroll any of the ones you want. With Knizia, you have to lock at least one die. But if you lock multiple dice, then you only can reroll the dice you didn't lock. And so eventually you're going to run out of rerolls that way. In this game, it's a cooperative game, and I actually played it solo. The reason is actually worth my collection is because there is a difficult side of the board and a variant rule that's in the rule book that makes the game a lot more interesting. You're trying to complete these giant vegetables. You're trying to put tokens on vegetables to complete them. And if you don't complete one vegetable per turn, the cat is going to move a step. And if the cat reaches the end, we all lose. That's the best way to describe it. But with the variant and with the difficult side of the board, this game becomes absolutely just a really great time, and there's nothing like it in terms of like a cooperative game in my collection. So that's I like it. The next game I played a round of Miaui. This is the Bruno Faduti game about the simultaneous selection with all the Hawaiian style cats, and there's like a tiki torch first player or like a player marker that's called Kiti, which I thought was very cute. Very chaotic, and if had the game not been as breezy and as short, I can get a game of this down in 10 minutes with 4 players. And this is why I'm keeping this game. I think it's very fresh, very fun, a little bit cutthroat and very chaotic, but because it actually boasts the time it says on the box and even less, like I can actually teach the game and play it in 10 minutes. That's miraculous. So that's Miaui, and I love simultaneous selection, so this is a keeper for me. The next game I played was the last game I played this month, and the first 2024 game that we're going to be talking about here. This is a Reiner Knizia game called Marabunta. There was no information on it on Board Game Geek, but I had some store credit for my local game store, so I decided to just use the rest of it to buy a Reiner Knizia game that is area control for 2 players, and I split you choose. So those 4 things led me to just buy this game without doing any research on it, and it was great. It is a really nasty, really mean little game. It's so nasty, and so there are these cupcakes on the game that give you in-game points because it's an area control game at the end. Most of your points are going to be through the area control. But you don't know that at first. During the game, if you cross off spots with cupcakes, you get the cupcakes. So my girlfriend ended up going for the cupcakes, but what we didn't realize was that near the end of the game, each player has to cross off a cupcake per turn in addition to their normal turn. So the cupcakes become the ticking time bomb for the game ending. And so because my girlfriend went for cupcakes so hard, she did not account for the fact that I was actually controlling most of the areas. And so when the game ended, and we very quickly, and we added up the points, I ended up crushing her because of the area control. And of course, see, this is the Reiner Knizia thing with the interlocking mechanism sort of thing. Everything is consequential. There's a reason for everything to exist. But the nastiness in this game, both from the eye split you choose and from the brutal nature of the area control, you're essentially kind of playing a game of kingdom builder where normally you have to be adjacent to other things. But if someone passes you a die that you cannot take in a certain region, you just have to get rid of the die. You have to burn the die completely. And so it's super cutthroat. And it reminds me of, I had not played any of the classic Knizia area control games, but this is the type of game that I imagine when I hear games like, say, Mexica, right, by Kramer and Kiesling. This is the type of game that I imagine. There are a couple of modern roll and write things added to it, but the central game reminds me of something that would have been designed 15 years ago. Just like, ugh, wow, it was really stress inducing. And then the next game we played was Mandala. I played one game of Mandala, and Mandala forever continues to be this interesting system that I just love to explore more of. The square cards are a little hard to shuffle, and there's this thing at the end of the game where you have to shuffle them one more time, and then there's like a turn or two more before the game ends. That part is a little bit fiddly, but the game itself is it's just so smooth. But the central game is also a game of area majority that has a bit of teeth, and then the scoring is just confusing enough that at the end of the game you have no idea who's going to be winning. So that's Mandala. Love that one. I think there's like a new game coming out called Patterns. Very excited to try that one out. It's a game in the Mandala line of games. So that's going to be really cool. Okay. Now we're getting to the one new play of a more midweight, heavier game. It was heavy for me for sure. It was heavy to learn the rules and without a copy of the game because it was someone else's copy, but I had agreed to learn the rules. And that was really fun. I think my teach of it ended up being really, really good. So I was proud of that. But this is Lacrimosa. Lacrimosa is the game about Mozart that was really, really popular probably now 2 years ago, right? A year and a month ago, probably. Around where Essen Time was in 2022. Lacrimosa was a really interesting game. So I liked many parts of it, right? I think the area control part with the staff paper was really, really interesting. I think the card row was pretty interesting. The fact that the cards have two different types and they occupy different spots on the row and the costs are different depending on what types they were. The traveling I wasn't as much of a fan of, and the card manipulation I was a fan of. But when they add up together, this falls into the line of Euro games where I feel like it's so well designed, right? But the game also gives you many leeways in giving you ways to earn points. It's like no matter which path you take, it ends up feeling about the same. And it does, but it doesn't, right? Because you could have no money near the end, at the end of the round, at the end of just the last phase of the game, and then it becomes an uphill battle for you to earn stuff. But there are still ways to eke out points, and I feel like no matter which strategy you use, there are always going to be ways to eke out points, and eventually everything gives you points, and it's not a point salad game, but it's just point fluid, you know? You realize that everything ends up giving you around the same amount of points. But then, you know, some you earn at the end of the game, like the area control. Some you earn during the game. Some you earn near the end of the game because you want to like collect your sets, or you want to like burn some cards near the end. There's a trashing mechanism. If you trash your Opus cards, you get a big point boost, but there's a cost to do that, right? And so it's the point fluidness of it that I end up not being a huge fan of the game. I think the design is marvelous, and if I'm offered to play the game again, I totally would. But it definitely, because it's a longer game for me and I'm such a filler guy, I have to be thinking about whether I want to spend the time to play this game. And the answer is not really. But I know I'll get it played again this year, I'm sure. Now, here's something else that's interesting about this game. I think we played it at the recommended player count on Board Game Geek with 3 players, and I think the main reason for that is due to the length of the game. I think with 4 players, it does get a bit long. However, after thinking about it a long time, I think the game is better with 4, mechanically speaking. One of the reasons I looked at the game and I agreed, like, oh, we should just play it with 3 players, is because it seemed like the area control, would be great with 3. It seemed like the card row would be great with 3. But I had not accounted for that the fact that each turn, players are doing different actions. And as the game goes on, they become more specialized. So there are turns where the card row doesn't even move if everyone's focused on the area control or the travel side of the board. So with 4 players, you can actually get a better experience, because if 3 players go for the area control part ends up feeling like a 3-player game. And I felt like the travel tiles didn't end up, it could have been a little more chaotic. The tiles could have been a little more like, I need to get that tile now, but there are 3 turns until me. But the chances of people doing the travel is also low. Do I do the traveling now? Those decisions, I think, will become a little more anxious, bit more anxiety inducing, and wonderful, because that's what we want, if it's a 4-player game. Because there's the hand management, everyone's deck ends up becoming different, and so the things they're prioritizing is different. So we need each department of the board to feel like a 3-player game. And so that's why the 4-player count, I think, would be the best. So I'm really curious to try out a 4-player version of this game some point soon. So that's Lacrimosa. I still liked it. I think it's a marvel of a design, but it's not really what I look for in a Euro game. All right, Kabuto Sumo. That's the next game that I played. Kabuto Sumo is especially good with the All-Star variant and the Total Mayhem. The All-Star expansion and especially the Total Mayhem expansion, because this becomes a game where, like, there are probably 1 too many rules each round, but the fact that anything can happen but doesn't ends up making the game extremely fun. And it's the coin pushing game. I think with the base game, it would be a little too dull for me. And I am a dexterity fan, but I was not sold on the concept to begin with. But then when you add the guitar, when you add the ladder, when you add all these like side mechanisms that even make it more thematic with the wrestling theme, Kabuto Sumo becomes an absolute hoot. Okay. The next game I played is listed here as Kaching, but it's actually Combit. We played 1 round of Combit. That's the version that I have, the really disgusting German version, the one with like basically no art. Combit is, let me switch my, there we go. Cross my legs here on the chair. Combit is like chess, the card game, because you lay the cards on multiple columns, and you can always see what cards are being covered, are being blocked. You can only grab the card that's currently exposed. And so you need to basically buy low and sell high. And so when you're buying cards, you're opening up other cards for your opponent, and you're eventually going to be multiplying groups of these cards and getting the product of them. A lot of people say this is a good math game, and sure, it's a good math game. It does have that educational quality, but for me, the game is just a great one. Very tense, because I tend to be very bad at it. And so for me, I don't know what the right choice is a lot of the times. And the game is very well designed. That's Kaching or Combit, if you don't care about the art. The next game I played is definitely, it's the ultimate 2-player game. It's Hanamikoji. Hanamikoji's great, and I only played it once this month, but that's okay. My one play of Hanamikoji, we used one of the I have all the expansion tiles. We used the variant where you need to take 4 cards out, shuffle them, or like just present them to your opponent face down. Your opponent removes 3 of them without knowing what they are, and you need to keep the last one. So this is a very, very chaotic mode. And I love that with the 7 different variants, right? So there are now 8 different ways to play. There could be like a different mood of the day. Some days I'm feeling very secretive, so I'm going to play one where only 2 cards show up face up before we score. Everything else is hidden. That's one. Some days I want to be very generous. I choose one where it's a bit more generous. Yeah, that's Hanamikoji. It's fantastic. It's so strange. It's a strange feeling game, especially when somebody ends up winning because of how the tokens end up. It's a tug of war, but between the rounds, the arena of war that you're winning, stay there. So the opponent actually needs to win it back, and so the game ends when somebody has 4 out of the 7 arenas on their side, and so it's usually like it usually becomes a job for them to either maintain an arena while winning some of the other ones. So the win ends up sneaking up on people. It's like, oh, I won. Let's play again. Let's see why. Let's find out how the system works. It's a game that is forever just elusive enough that I just want to keep on playing it. Keep on playing it once a month. The next game I played is a Knizia classic, in my opinion, especially at the 3-player count. This is Easy Come, Easy Go. And I had mentioned the game earlier, and I think Easy Come, Easy Go is actually very similar to like a competitive version of whereas is the cooperative version of Easy Come, Easy Go. They both have that dice freezing mechanic, but Easy Come, Easy Go is basically Knizia's Yahtzee with quirky dice. Dice go from 0 through 5, and there are these various tiles that you can win when you complete the different like Yahtzee mechanisms, basically. But the best thing about this game, especially at 3 players, is that once somebody takes the 3rd tile, they are basically set to win the game, unless one of the other 2 players can earn one of the tiles, meet the conditions, say like 3 of a kind, but all 4 dice need to be even. That's one of them. That's a weird one. But let's say, like each opponent has one more chance to meet any one of the 3 tiles that person has and steal it from them, and that prevents them from winning. And in a 3-player game, that's just always tense and always entertaining, and that's why Easy Come, Easy Go is my 3-player Yahtzee variant of choice. I actually have the old version with the sort of cartoon comic book type characters, but I used a couple of, I drew a couple of the cards that were added for the Korea board games, or is that the company? The Korean edition of Easy Come, Easy Go. They're like these 2 extra tiles now, so I just wrote some numbers on 2 cards, and now I have the Korean version, but with the old art, so that's fantastic. After Easy Come, Easy Go, I played one game of Cloud City. I really, really like Cloud City. I also really like Neoville. I think that Phil Walker Harding managed to create a very interesting way of combining tile laying with this 3D element, and the production is a bit of a headache. Honestly, the colors are kind of dull. The beams that you're eventually going to be laying on top of your skyscrapers, they don't really tell you how long they are, which is a big problem. And even the designs, there might be like 6 segments that you can see on a beam, but it ends up being like a 5 long beam, which is super weird. And the points they give you also compounds. Like a 5 long beam ends up being like 8 points or something. That part I always find a little hard to teach, because if that part was smoother, it would be a much more gateway friendly game. But as is, I can only play this with people that are a little bit more seasoned gamers, so that I don't have to teach that part as hard as I am right now. But Cloud City is very fun. Fortunately, we did not get the scoring objective, the public goal, that is you cannot build underneath other buildings. I always dread that one showing up when we play this game, but there's a different puzzle every time, right? And then I had one 4-player game of Century Spice Road. The game that I said, Trekking Through History, kicked off the three-player version of that, basically. Century Spice Road is really neat. I am really, really looking forward to the two-player... no, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm really, really looking forward to the individual release of the Golden Deals expansion, right? Because with Century Spice Road, I have all the promo cards. So it's like the extra quirky, extra strong, like overpowered version of Century Spice Road, which I think just makes everyone's card engine a little more unique. We don't have to rely on the conversion as much. The promo cards, which I think there's like a size issue now with the new printing of it, but the promo cards, they give like more like pure generating type of cards, and so the game becomes more spicy, for lack of a better word. But I'm really looking forward to the Golden Deals expansion for multiple reasons. One, I heard that the Golden Deals expansion with the card sleeves, they can combine with the combined games of Century, and I felt like the card row sometimes doesn't move fast enough in like my combined games of 1 and 2, for example. So that's something that I really like. But I also think that with the Golden Deals expansion, and the only way I was able to get like the rules is from Marco Omnigamer's review of it. He was gracious enough to actually review the Golden Deals expansion and explain the mechanisms. So thanks to him, shout out to him, I have some source of knowing what that expansion is all about. And I don't want to get the big box because it's unwieldy and I have everything for the game anyway. But they say that the Golden Deals expansion is going to be released on Board Game Geek later on this year. So I'm really, really excited about that. But anyway, the other reason I want to use the Golden Deals expansion is because I think it could make a really solid two-player version of Century Spice Road with that extra thing where you can get rid of cards. And so the card row ends up moving a bit faster, but not too fast. Like I think with the Golden Deals thing, it could be a little too fast in like the multiplayer games, a little too chaotic, and I don't think the game needs it. But in a two-player game, that's a puzzle that I'm really willing to chow down on. So that's Century Spice Road. Some things I'm looking forward to, but the game itself is super solid at 4 people. I introduced 2 sort of novice gamers. They play a lot of Catan, but they don't know anything much else. And Century Spice Road was an absolute hit with them. And it's just that game. It's that good. Okay, and then I played. These are the games I played twice. Yes, I finally got my copy of Tucano by Helvetique played. And this is a game that actually immediately killed Colorado for me. Tucano is a game where it just chaotically, each turn you need to add a card to all of 3 columns. So you're adding 3 cards, 1 to each column, and then somebody has to take one of the columns, right? So some columns, they have a lot of negative point stuff, but they become juicy enough eventually that someone has to scoop them up. And there's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of fun. I got completely terrible luck in my second game of this. It soured the taste a little bit, but I know that's just the nature of the game. So Tucano is just really fun. The art is hilarious, really weird, especially the lychee card. A lot of the people I played with didn't even know what lychee was, but they saw the picture and they were like, what is going on there? So that's really fun. That's Tucano. Highly recommend. For me, a Colorado killer. Next game I played twice of is my favorite, for me, heavyweight game. That's Terraforming Mars, right? Terraforming Mars, it's so easy to teach at this point that I consider, like, as far as the teaches, it is a maybe, less complex game, more medium weight. But with Terraforming Mars, I actually roll these dice. I roll this die. I roll it multiple times, and it's going to determine whether we use Venus, whether we use colonies, whether we use turmoil. And this is for 3-player games mostly. I also like to play 4 players, but I don't use turmoil for 4 players because the area control is way too chaotic. But I think I played a game. One game was with colonies. Oh no, one game was with everything, Venus included. And then another game was with turmoil but without colonies, which created a totally different type of game, right? And I have certain cards selected where the colony cards that don't have anything to do with the actual colony part, that like are compatible with the base game, I shuffle in no matter what. So I always have like a mixed deck of Terraforming Mars, which is just really, really great. I feel like I'm always adding house rules to that one, but they're still within the realm of the game. If we don't use Venus in a 3-player game or with any player count, we use a world government no matter what. We always world gov, so that if the game ends up lasting too long, which it usually does anyway, there's at least some sort of global parameter moving up. We always use world gov, and I know that's controversial. It makes a lot of the actions that you can do once per generation a little bit weaker, admittedly, but I think it makes the game a little more structured, and so that's the way I play Terraforming Mars. Always love it, always will. The next game I played twice was Splendor. Splendor is my 2 or 3 player engine building game, lightweight game of choice. I love Splendor at 2 or 3. I think both games were 3 player. I don't really remember when I played Splendor. There was one near the end of the month. That was great. And, okay, spicy take time, right? So, the general consensus on the Cities of Splendor expansion is a little mixed. Some people like it. Some people think it's neat, but like it doesn't change the game. Like you only play with it sometime. The base game is strong enough. But nobody cares about the easiest module in the game, which is the Cities variant, right? And I'm probably going to make a separate video on this someday. For me, I no longer play base Splendor. My base Splendor is the Cities variant. I teach people the Cities variant, and for most people it's like, oh, it doesn't even make a difference. But for me, the little bit of difference it makes actually makes the game a lot better. First of all, for someone who's a complete novice, teaching the nobles is always kind of hard, but teaching the cities arguably is equally hard. However, you need the cities. You need to know what the cities are to win the game. So you never run into the situation where you teach someone brand new, you think they understand how the nobles work, and then halfway through you get a nobles, and then they're like, oh, I forgot about that they existed. That has happened to me so many times. But with the cities, that doesn't happen. Like, I keep on reminding them, okay, do you understand how the city works? The points versus the types of cards you need to get the city, and then somebody gets a city, and then that's the end of the game. Okay. I make sure they get it, which makes the teach maybe a little more wordy, but it actually gives me more peace of mind. The other thing is, a lot of people who criticize Splendor, they don't like the fact that the game, there's a lot of luck of the draw. Like if a card comes up and then someone happens to need that card for their engine, they grab it, and that's unfair for some people. But I think with the cities version, because for most of the cities there's a specific card requirement, people start honing in on it. And when attention is actually paid to a certain part of the game, it becomes less random. And I mean, it is equally random, but the perception is, if you see someone has 3 green cards and they need 4 green cards to win the game, the moment a green card shows up, someone might reserve it immediately. And so this sort of almost like a speculation of what cards need to come up, the speculating what other players are going for, becomes much stronger in the cities variant, because you're not only looking for the points, but you have a reason to look for people's card layout. And that is by far the reason I think cities is so strong. I even use the weird action where I reserve from the top of the deck way more when I play cities. Cities is just fantastic. It makes the game more replayable, and it just give me a reason to. It makes Splendor more mechanically strong and more mechanically intriguing. And I love the feeling that all the points you are getting are from the cards. There's no nobles that grant you free points. That's good, but I have the Trading Post variant if I want to use nobles. If I have the Orient variant if I want to use nobles. I even have Strongholds if I want to use nobles, right? So the Cities variant is the way that I like to teach the game. Splendor. Okay, and then I played, and whoa, this is an extremely obscure card game. This shows how deep into my board game geek rabbit holes I go. I played 2 games of this card game called Pungi. Yeah, when's the last time anyone has ever thought of that? Pungi is a game where everyone can see the back of your card, so what suit you're playing. And then you're playing like a quasi face-down trick-taking game, except you're never obliged to follow suit. And this is not during the trick-taking renaissance. This is like way before that. This is one of those like Amigo games, you know, the little card games. This is one that I think quickly got forgotten. But I think this game is fantastic. You can choose to follow suit or not, but after everyone laid out what suit they're playing, whichever suit has majority on the table gets to choose first. And then what they choose is basically like a predetermined thing. If you played the highest of the majority suit, you choose the first snake. There's a snake charming theme. But if it's a negative point snake, then you're not going to want to win that. So because the row changes, it reminds me of the Knizia game Meow. It's another cat themed game, Meow. That's a very similar game, but it's even lighter, right? Pungi has a little bit of that intrigue with like, ooh, join my suit. We can be majority. No, I'm not going to join your suit. And depending on where you're sitting, because you're not simultaneously doing it, you're doing it in turn order, the third and fourth player have a lot of say in what suit ends up winning. And so that dynamic is really well thought out. I love it. There's a little mechanism with changing positive to negative and negative to positive that I think is just the icing on the cake. Pungi is fantastic. My copy was way too expensive because this game oddly showed up at Millennium Games in shrink. So I got it, but it was overpriced, but I'm just happy that I finally found a copy of Pungi. Okay. There was another day where I was open to playing whatever, and I had heard about this game from church people called Pass the Pigs. So I played Pass the Pigs, and it's garbage. I mean, you know it was garbage. I mean, do you know it was garbage? Maybe you like Pass the Pigs. That's fine. Pass the Pigs is a game where you just roll these tiny two pigs, and depending on where they land, you're like scoring points, and you can keep pushing your luck until there's a round where the two pigs are laying side by side and on opposite sides, and you'd be surprised how often that happens. When that happens, you lose all the points you've won that round, and then turn passes to the next player. Whatever, I'll play it, but whatever. The funny thing is, I did end up playing Texas Hold'em the day after, on the same day after Pass the Pigs, and actually like Texas Hold'em less than Pass the Pigs. So Pass the Pigs ended up being a little bit redeeming for me, which is hilarious. Okay, the next game I played is my other 2024 release, and again, this is based on the retail release. I actually follow Grant's Games Rec. I'm shouting out so many of the creators I love, and I love doing that. Grant's Games Recs, he does basically monthly documents on what games are being released on retail, which is really, really important for someone like me. And I actually am a patron of his as well. And I just look at his little Google sheets, and I'm able to see what games are actually solidly in retail. So this is a 2023 game per se, but this is a 2024 release for me. And this is MLEM, Space Agency. This game is being advertised all over Board Game Geek, and it's also being talked about quite a bit. It's being played at conventions apparently, and it's so cheap. It's $30, and you get this long neoprene mat. That's your push your luck board. And this has the deep blue type mechanism where like one person is pushing everyone's luck, but everyone is sort of invested, right? And Deep Blue actually looks pretty good. I never got my hands on a copy of it. I know it got poo-pooed on by the Days of Wonder fans, but I think Deep Blue is for me. But I don't know if it's going to be as good as MLEM at this point. And my store actually had the BLEP promo, and after reading the rules, and after trusting in Knizia after so many years, I've decided for my first game to just include every single little variant and expansion. Every single one. I just dump them in. Now, this did create a problem, which was my teach of it was terrible. It was a horrible teach. I played many things wrong, and we had to reset the game. So maybe for your first game, just choose one variant and use that. Get a little taste for it. Make sure you read every rule right. The rulebook isn't even bad. It's just me. Although the rulebook is weird in that it didn't say that the same player has to keep on pushing their luck. That was never explicitly stated. You really have to infer that, which I didn't think was really great. But yeah, MLEM is fantastic. After finally getting the rules right, I think you really want to be eventually playing with every single module, because they're not at odds with each other, and they make the game a really chaotic, but it's still got that Knizia feeling of like being well calculated, and the tokens that come up that you add later are so interesting. They make the push your luck that much more exciting, and it is possible to get to the deep space, and sometimes with complete like shock. Like the very last turn, I got off on a planet early, and then all the other 3 astronauts ended up on deep space, and I was the only one who was stranded on this planet midway because I decided to get off. This is like that Celestia type of game where you decide to jump off whenever if you don't think the people can push, the captain is able to push your luck enough to get to a far enough space before the rocket crashes. So you can jump off at any time. You're just out of the rest of the round. But I found that everyone was still very invested during each turn of MLEM, even if they jump off early. And the game is just fantastic. Absolutely great. About the same weight, I would say, as Quacks of Quedlinburg. So if you want the simultaneous, you play Quacks. If you want the one person rolling and everyone just watching, you play MLEM. And I think 4 players is the best count. I think 5. The actual game part, the area control part of it, becomes a little chaotic. So I would recommend 4. And get the BLEP expansion if you can. The promo. That's a good one. And then I played 2 games of Fantasy Realms. And I think the weird thing about Fantasy Realms is that how do you say this? The game says on the box it's only for 3 to 6 players, but there's a 2-player variant that arguably teaches the game and works better than any of the other player counts. So actually right now, because in most games when you get your hand of cards it's a lot to look at, I would actually prefer the 2-player variant over any other player count right now. I just love Fantasy Realms with the 2-player variant, and it's absolutely a great time. And I still think it's the best of the type of game, like the Red Rising type of game. I think Fantasy Realms still manages to get the most game with the most simplicity. And I have the Cursed Horde expansion, and I don't play with the item cards. But sometimes I add the undead stuff, even though the art is sometimes really grotesque, which I like, but not everyone on the table likes it. So yeah, that's Fantasy Realms. Okay, we gotta speed through these last few, because these ones I play a lot, and so next month I'll probably have more time to talk about them in detail. Next one I played is Elements. Elements is a 2-player sort of a quasi-bluffing, back and forth speculation type of game. You can look up the rules elsewhere, but this for me is like a less chaotic version of Tacocat spelled backwards. They're like the same complexity, but it's so intriguing, and rounds are also 30 seconds long, and I really like these games that are able to make meaningful rounds, meaningful experiences in very short rounds. And this one also has the air, land, and sea mechanism, where you can give up early. Just, what is it called? They call it yield. You can yield the game and only give your opponent 1 point, or you can continue, and if your opponent wins, they get 2 points, right? Well, I love that. And this does it in a much more mathy and elegant way compared to the card combos of Air, Land, and Sea. And I like both, but Elements is definitely the easier one to introduce to someone who doesn't know anything about games and has no, let's say, attention span, right? Elements can really do the trick. So that's Elements. And I only play 2 games of Dominion. Dominion's my favorite game. I actually have every single card memorized. I have all the expansions. That's me and Dominion. But I only was able to play 2, and they were my sets. I actually play tested a set. I guess I can show it here. I play tested a set so that it's exactly how I like it. It was really chaotic. It had something to do with using counterfeit to trash cards, and then you can discard market squares to get gold. But because counterfeit is during the buy phase, so it becomes a little more like restrictive, all that good stuff. So that was really neat. And then, of course, the counterfeit can use the golds that you won with the market squares later and play them twice and then trash them. And it's like, oh, it's so good. And there's also nobles in the game, which is really interesting. Yeah, yeah. And that set actually used a first edition prosperity card, which is Venture, to good use. I don't know why they got rid of Venture. I guess it's pretty weak when you randomize the game, which is how most people play it. But I was just very happy I got to use a first edition card in the form of Venture. So that's Dominion. The next game I played was Face de Bouc. Now this is a crazy game. This I played 3 times. It's a little French game. There's also a German version called Toddles Bobbles. It basically has these weird looking little toddler plushie dolls, and we take turns flipping them. The first time one of them shows up, you have to name it, give it a name. The next time something shows up, you need to remember the name. And there's like 8 or 10 types of 10 different toddlers. So it becomes a name remembering game. And there's also a speed element, because if you're the first person to remember, if it's a familiar toddler, you get to take the cards. So it's like a slapping game without the slapping part, because you just need a name. Oh, pardon me. You just have to name the name that was previously given to it. And it's so fun. I love this one. If you can find a copy of Face de Bouc, and the concept that I'm describing sounds extremely entertaining, you need a copy of it. It's amazing. And then as you play more of it, the names that you've previously given to the toddlers come up again in your head, and it makes it even more confusing. And for me, it just really, it really makes me, ponder on the fact that we all have names, and names, once we give a name to one of these cards, these toddlers, that toddler almost has a different personality. It's like, oh, that's Hootie, that's John. Some people, they like to play with really boring names so that no one can remember them. Yeah, that's John. But we all have in our heads what John looks like. Like, is that a John for us? Like, does that look like a John? It doesn't matter, because that's a John, because somebody named it John. And so that type of stuff, that really like esoteric stuff that comes with just the fact that people have names. That's what this game makes me think of. And then we played 5 games of one of my absolute favorites. That is in nobody's favorite list, except Mark from Board Game Barrage, I think. This is Ricochet Robots. I love this game. I play it so much. I'm quite good at the game, and I have a couple of people who are quite good at it, so it becomes very competitive now, particularly between me and my girlfriend. We actually play it as a 2-player game, and it's back and forth. It's very competitive, finding out these solutions, getting the robots to move, keeping track of that in your head, and then eventually demonstrating the steps that you've come up with. The demonstrating part is my favorite, because you go back and forth like, oh, I got there in 6 steps, but I still want to see the 9-step process that you had, because it's such a great way of appreciating how all of our brains work. And surrounding this really strange puzzle. And so that's Ricochet Robots. I've have over 100 plays of this at this point, and I'm very proud. All right. Wow. The last 2 games here are all solo games. This is very exciting. So, the first one I played 6 times, because 3 of the times I played with wrong rules. And this was all on the same night, where I just spent like 2 or so hours figuring this game out. This is Card City XL. This is the first Alban VR game I've played. I've not played Clinic or Small City or all of those. This is a game that, according to Board Game Geek right now, is best as a solo game. And so, it's this really intricate city building puzzle. And I'm not usually a city building fan, but the way this game is like designed is so intriguing, especially as a solo puzzle. What I will say about this game that's really rough is that for the solo game, first of all, this game has like apparently 240 different ways of playing it, which is crazy, but you need some of the variants in order for the charts that you need to refer to see how well you did, in order for the charts to make sense, you need to use some of the variants. And the 6 games I played were all of the base game, and the base game is just too brutal. And some of the variants actually make the game a little easier, and I think that's when the charts actually start becoming words are escaping me. I've been talking too long. A valid way, a feasible way of actually assessing how well you did. So make sure you get to the variants quicker if you own this game, and if you have a copy of this that you haven't played in years, maybe you want to take this out and just mess with it a little more. I have not played the multiplayer version. I don't know if I want to play the multiplayer version, because the solo puzzle does seem really, really neat. There's a lot of replayability in it, and so that's Card City XL. Not much of a looker though. And the game that I played the most, 8 times, my game of the month, is Onirim. Onirim is fantastic. And at this point, I've shuffled the cards enough. I actually got kind of irritated in my thumbs because of how much I've shuffled them. There's a lot of shuffling in this game. But now my cards have been broken into enough where the shuffling doesn't feel as annoying. And I like shuffling. I mean, my favorite game is Dominion, which is great, but Onirim has even more shuffling. And I do think the pronunciation is Onirim, because Oni means devil or nightmare, or demonic in Japanese, and then rim is the edge. Onirim. It's not Onirim. It's not Onirim. It's Onirim. And once you get used to saying it like that, it actually becomes the most, I think, pleasant way. It just flows off the tongue. Onirim. How nice is that? All right, so yeah. Onirim is fantastic. This one, I immediately jumped into the modules, the 7 variations. Right now, my favorite way to play is with the one that gives you 12 doors, right? Instead of 8 that you need to find, but it also gives you a new type of symbol that you can either play, or it generates a new power for you. I like that mode a lot. I messed with the Sphinx's expansion, which you have to get separate. That one was super brutal. And then I messed with the first one, where you have to get all the doors in a certain order. That one was also really brutal. So right now, if I really want to win the game, the way I play is with I'll put the name of the expansion here. The one that you need 12 doors, but you also have a bigger deck and more symbols. So it's a bit swingier, but it does dilute the nightmare cards actually quite a bit. So yeah, that's Onirim. I had a lot of fun with it. It's definitely my favorite solo game right now, but I might be getting a little game called Hadrian's Wall next month, and we'll see if I have the brain for that. So it's going to be very exciting. Overall, January was an excellent month in gaming, and I'm so happy that not only did I log everything, but I was able to make this video to tell you all about it. So hope you had a good time, and I'll see you soon. Bye.